Hello and welcome again to World Talks. I'm Adam Jasa. Poland's conservative nationalist opposition has split into radical and moderate groups in parliament a year before general elections. Numerically, far-right and nationalist parties stand ahead of the ruling centre-left coalition of Prime Minister Donald Tusk. But will they be able to govern together given the level of personal acrimony and major policy differences? To answer this question, I'm joined now by Professor Aleks Szczerbiak, a specialist on Poland at the University of Sussex. Professor Szczerbiak, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be with you.
So, Law and Justice, the main opposition party, lost its status as the largest group in Polish parliament after former Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki walked out with 40 deputies. What does that mean for the right, for the conservative right in Poland? How significant is this development?
It's a very significant. It's the biggest split in Law and Justice's 25-year, and it really means that the era of Law and Justice as the largest, the hegemonic part of Polish right, seems to be drawing to a close. It's also a huge blow for Jarosław Kaczyński, the Law and Justice leader, who has also been the unquestioned political authority for many years. He's now, though Law and Justice is still the largest party, he's now the leader of several leaders on the Polish right. And it creates two particular problems for the Polish right, looking at next year. Because you're now going to have a very fragmented right, the Polish electoral system, the decoupling system in proportional representation, favours larger parties, not parties that are more fragmented. There is also a 5% threshold that parties have to cross in order to get into Parliament, and with parties on the right, there's much more of a risk that one of those will not be able to cross the 5% threshold, and therefore their votes will be wasted. So the problem for the right in Poland, although most people want to vote for right-wing parties, governing opposition parties, is translating their support into governing power. That's going to be the problem at the next election for them, if things stay as they are.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say, Jarosław Kaczyński has been a dominating figure on the right for 30 years, probably. And many times before, people thought he was finished. He always came back. So what makes you think that this is over? Is it because he's turning 77?
I think that his age and his health is one of those factors. As you get older, it's more difficult to kind of stay on top of the current trends that are happening in politics and respond to them. So somebody who might have been a brilliant strategist and very on top of his game for many years, and the outstanding figure really on the Polish right, as time goes on and things move on, finds it's much more difficult to stay on those particular trends and keep his authority. The thing is that I think that the challenges that are emerging on the Polish right seem to be much more substantial and have much more power. The two confederations on the radical right, the Free Market Confederation grouping, the original grouping, and the more ultra-nationalist Confederation of the Polish Crown of Grzegorz Braun, seem to have established themselves much more firmly than any of the other previous challengers on the Polish right. It's going to be much more difficult for Law and Justice to assert its hegemony. We shouldn't exaggerate. This is still clearly the largest party on the Polish right. It has a big loyal electorate, and these are people who are going to stay with it probably, and it will probably be the largest party on the right after the next election. But its position as the unquestioned hegemon are now very much threatened and moving into the past. There's also the problem for Mr. Kaczyński that Karol Nawrocki, the Law and Justice President, seems to be emerging in the eyes of most Poles and of most Polish political groupings as the key figure on the right. And he's moving him side as the centre of gravity of where right-wing voters and right-wing politicians seem to be orientating themselves.
So are you suggesting that we're witnessing a major sort of generational change as well in Polish politics, where the former Solidarity activists or politicians are pushed aside and the new generation comes in. People like Mr. Morawiecki, the former Prime Minister, Mr. Nawrocki, and the leaders of Konfederacja who are even younger.
Yes, I think there's a lot in that. I mean, I wouldn't exaggerate this. I mean, problem that this is a process that's still taking place very, very slowly. As you say, people have written Mr. Kaczyński off in the past. They've also proclaimed the end of the Law and Justice and Civic Coalition duopoly on several occasions. I don't think either of these things are going to happen in a hurry. These will probably still be the two largest groupings after the next election. But that generational change is very much taking place. You can see this among what's happening with younger voters who are not voting for these big two duopoly parties. You can see, as you say, in the emergence of the Confederation, which is the best supported party among younger voters. Mr. Nawrocki, we've talked about a different generation from Mr. Kaczyński, now the key figure on the Polish right. Actually, Mr. Morawiecki himself is convinced that he's going to be such a substantial figure. Because really, for a new party, they should really, his grouping, Growth Plus or Development Plus, as some people call it, really be polling much, much better. At the moment, they're polling 6 or 7% in the opinion polls. And really, a new grouping, simply on the basis of its newness, should be looking for about 10% really at least, because this is going to be much, much more difficult to sustain when the media interest moves on from Mr. Morawiecki. So I'm less convinced about his specific prospects. But generally, I think you're right. I think this new generations of political leaders and activists and indeed of voters are starting to move aside that old generation of solidarity veterans like Mr. Jarosław Kaczyński. But as I say, it's a slow process. It's going to end overnight.
So in a sense, if Mr. Morawiecki's project flops and he fails to pass this 5% threshold, you mentioned the Polish electoral system that is going to favor the biggest party, which means Prime Minister Tusk's party. So as things stand at the moment, and week is a long time in politics, but as things stand, Tusk is benefiting from the split on the right.
Yes, he is. I mean, in the short term, it's a political gift for him because up until this split happened a couple of weeks ago, the stories that were dominating the summer news cycle was a hospital scandal involving a doctor of the ruling party, alleged VIP waiting rooms, mismanagement of that hospital the day when this wasn't on the news headlines. And this has obviously wiped all that off. I mean, suddenly that moved into the background, and it's given Mr. Tusk and Civic Coalition a chance to control the narrative. But two things that you do need in mind here. One is that if we get closer to the election and it becomes evident that Mr. Morawiecki's project is a political flop, that it might not cross the 5% threshold, well, they could actually end up doing a deal with Law and Justice. They could actually decide to fight as an electoral coalition, or even if that doesn't happen, some or even many of those politicians who are currently aligned with him might decide to move back to Law and Justice. We don't know, it's a long way to go yet, but this is a very real scenario. The other thing I think for Mr. Tusk and the Civic Coalition government is that although they've been given a short-term tactical gift, a lot of them problems that the government has, the fact that many people feel it hasn't delivered on its election promises, the fact that people are worried about the cost of living standards, you know, what's happening to the economy and how it might affect them personally, of the kind of the bigger economic growth numbers. None of these things have gone away. Most people still are not very happy with the government. People still want to vote for opposition parties. Short-term tactical relief or gains Mr. Tusk might get from the self-inflicted that the divisions on the Polish right have given to him, none of those problems will go away. At the end of the day, if Mr. Tusk wants the next election, he's got to sort himself out. The ruling coalition has got to get its act together and not rely on the opposition making mistakes.
But isn't the president helping a bit by vetoing every proposal that any substantial proposal that the Tusk government is doing? And clearly the government is beginning to use that as a sort of narrative, saying, look, you know, the president is blocking us from anything, but despite that, the economy is doing well, wages are going up, just don't vote these guys in.
That's definitely the government's narrative, and indeed they try and tie it in some of the bigger messaging that they have on things like security. I mean, they'll argue, for example, that by undermining the government, it's kind of undermining Polish security at a time when, we're in a very risky geopolitical situation. To Mr. Nawrocki's vetoing of the SAFE EU defence loan scheme. So that's narrative. Mr. Nawrocki doesn't care about this. I think that he thinks the bigger risk for him is being passive. People elected him, he feels, because they wanted him to stand up to the government, to be a very assertive, active president with his own political agenda. Certainly the people who voted for him wanted that, even if there's a lot of people who support the government who are very unhappy about it. And at the moment, his risk, his gamble, seems to be paying off because he is currently the most popular politician in Poland. So it's very clearly the government's attack on to try and present him as a blocker. But at the moment, it's not really working that well. And Mr. Nawrocki, for the moment at least, in that particular PR battle, seems to have the upper hand.
Right. Interesting that you mentioned this because, the government has had a number of public relations missteps over the summer. But the right is also under scrutiny because of ties to a crypto asset exchange that has collapsed. And we're just learning today that there will be some new revelations showing the degree or the depth of the connections between this failed exchange and Mr. Nawrocki, as well as some of the far-right leaders. How serious a problem is that for the right, do you think?
Well, we'll see. I mean, we'll have to see what exactly the issues are and what they say. But I think the general thing here is that really Mr. Nawrocki is a bit of a Teflon politician, certainly as far as people who voted for him is concerned. He's not what you might call the president of all polls. Lots of presidents try and become a sort of at least for public consumption, a non-partisan figure, even if, behind the scenes or more subtly they're favouring the groups that they support. Mr. Nawrocki's not tried to do this. He's tried to deliver for the people that he's voted for, to appeal over the heads of the mainstream media, what he calls the Warsaw elites, to the ordinary voters. And at the moment,
understand. Thank you very much.
It's working. They seem to be forgiving him all these things, and I think that he's got a lot of Teflon still left.
I'm afraid we have to run, but thank you very much for these comments.
Thank you very much. It's always my pleasure.
Thank you for watching, but stay with us for a news update.